Most folks think the greatest threat comes from strangers, but when the hands that strike bear the shadows of the very children you raised, you realize the deepest wounds aren't to the body, but to trust itself. I lost nearly everything, but the price they paid afterward was far steeper. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals come wrapped in familiar faces, carrying memories of bedtime stories and scraped knees you once kissed better. My name is Margaret Ellison, and I've lived on this 1,200 acres of Montana land for over 40 years. That autumn morning when my children returned, the air carried the scent of dried hay and something else, a wrongness that made my skin prickle despite the familiar surroundings. The wind whistled through the row of cottonwoods my late husband Edward and I had planted our first year here, but today even their rustling sounded like warnings. I was checking the fence line near the main road when I saw the black SUV kicking up dust on our gravel drive. My heart should have leaped with joy. Daniel and Rebecca hadn't visited together in nearly 3 years, but as I walked back toward the house, each step felt heavier than the last. Maybe it was the way the morning light caught the vehicle's tinted windows, turning them into dark mirrors that reflected nothing back. Daniel stepped out first, and for a moment, I almost recognized my gentle boy in the man adjusting his expensive suit jacket against the October chill. He'd inherited Edward's height and broad shoulders, but somewhere along the way, investment banking had hardened his features into something calculating. When he finally looked at me, his smile never quite reached his eyes. "Mom," he said, and the word felt rehearsed. Rebecca emerged from the passenger side like she was stepping onto a stage. My daughter had always been sharp, valedictorian, Harvard MBA, the works, but success in commercial real estate had honed her into something that reminded me of polished steel, beautiful, cold, and capable of cutting deep. Her heels clicked against the gravel with military precision as she approached. "You look well, Mother," she said, her gaze already sweeping across the property behind me like an appraiser cataloging assets. I forced myself to smile, to open my arms for embraces that felt more like business handshakes. "This is unexpected? Both of you together? Can't we visit our mother without an agenda?" Daniel's laugh was too quick, too bright. But I knew better. In the years since Edward's passing, they'd never come without wanting something. First it was small things. Could I co-sign this loan? Could they borrow against the property for that investment opportunity? I'd always said no, gently but firmly, honoring Edward's wishes to keep the land intact. As we walked toward the house, I noticed how they flanked me, Daniel on my right, Rebecca on my left, like herding cattle. I thought, then pushed the comparison away. These were my children, the same ones whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose nightmares I'd soothed. "The place looks rustic," Rebecca observed, her tone suggesting this wasn't a compliment. "That barn could use new paint." "It's functional," I replied. "That's what matters." Daniel's hand briefly touched my elbow, guiding me up the porch steps I'd climbed thousands of times without help. "You know, Mom, at your age, maintaining all this must be exhausting." At my age, I was 68, not 90. I still rode fence lines at dawn, still helped with calving season, still knew every inch of this land like the lines on my own palms, but I kept my voice mild. "I manage fine." Inside, they settled into the living room with the practiced ease of people who'd grown up here, but no longer belonged. Rebecca's designer bag looked absurd against Edward's old leather armchair. Daniel kept checking his phone, frowning at what I assumed were stock reports or client emails. "Coffee," I offered, needing a moment to collect myself. "Actually," Rebecca said, "we brought lunch from that new place in Billings. Thought we could catch up properly." She produced containers that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. As she unpacked them with efficient movements, I caught Daniel shooting her a look, the kind of silent communication that told me they'd rehearsed this visit like a business presentation. The unease that had started in my chest spread through my body like spilled ice water. They weren't here as my children. They were here as something else entirely. and I had the sinking feeling that by the time I found out it would already be too late. The dinner they'd orchestrated wasn't a family reunion. It was an ambush disguised as arugula salad and grilled salmon. We sat at the old oak table where they'd once done homework and complained about chores. But now it felt like a boardroom. Rebecca had even arranged the place settings with corporate precision. Water glasses aligned like soldiers. "This is nice," I said, though the fancy food tasted like sawdust in my mouth, though I would have been happy to cook. "You do too much already," Daniel said, that practiced concern creeping into his voice again. He exchanged another glance with Rebecca, their third since we'd sat down. Rebecca set down her fork with deliberate care. "Actually, Mom, we wanted to discuss something important with you about the future of the property." There it was. The real reason for their visit landed on the table like a dead bird. "The property's future is fine," I said evenly. "It'll keep being a working ranch, same as it's been for 4 decades. Rebecca reached into her bag and pulled out a folder thick with documents. The cover bore the logo of Silver Valley Development. "Mom, we need to be realistic. Do you know what developers are offering for acreage like this? Especially with the water rights you hold?" She spread glossy images across the table, architectural renderings of a luxury resort complete with a golf course where our hay fields stood, boutique hotels where the cattle grazed. Each picture felt like watching someone plan my funeral while I was still breathing. $7.8 million, Daniel said softly. "That's their initial offer for 900 acres. You could keep the house and the surrounding 300 acres. Live comfortably for—" "No?" The word came out harder than I intended. Rebecca's jaw tightened. "You haven't even looked at the proposal." "I don't need to. This land isn't for sale." "Mom, be reasonable." Daniel leaned forward, his banker's instincts kicking in. "The property taxes alone are bleeding you dry. I've seen the county assessments and the maintenance. When's the last time you replaced the irrigation system? Fixed the access roads properly?" I stared at him. "How did you see the county assessments?" A flash of guilt crossed his face before he recovered. "I was concerned, made some inquiries." "You mean you invaded my privacy?" "We're trying to help," Rebecca interjected, her voice sharpening. "Do you know what the tax burden will be in 5 years? 10? You're sitting on a gold mine while drowning in expenses you can barely afford." "I afford them fine." "By living like this?" She gestured around the kitchen, at the aged appliances, the worn linoleum, the simple furnishings. "When you could have comfort, security, the best health care." "I have everything I need." Daniel tried a different approach, his voice going soft and sympathetic. "Mom, what happens when you can't manage anymore? When climbing on a tractor gets too hard? When, God forbid, you have a fall out here alone?" "Then I'll deal with it." "Like Dad dealt with his heart condition?" Rebecca's words cut deep, and she knew it. "By ignoring it until it was too late." I stood up slowly, gripping the table edge. "Your father's death has nothing to do with this." "Doesn't it?" She stood too, matching my height in her heels. He was too stubborn to admit when he needed help, too proud to see what was best for everyone, and you're exactly the same. "What's best?" I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Watching bulldozers tear up land that's been in this family for generations? Seeing them dam up Miller's Creek for their golf course? That's what's best?" "It's business," Rebecca said coldly, "and sentiment doesn't pay bills." Daniel stood between us, ever the mediator. "Mom, please, at least consider it. Silver Valley is reputable. They'll preserve the historical elements, create jobs for the community. They'll create minimum wage service positions while pricing out every local family." I shot back. "I've seen what they did in Whitefish, in Bozeman. This isn't preservation, it's erasure." Rebecca's patience finally snapped. "You're being selfish. Do you know what Daniel and I could do with our share of that money? The opportunities for our children?" "Your share?" The words hung in the air like smoke. She had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." I looked between them, my children who'd become strangers. "You've already divided it up in your minds, haven't you?" Already spent money that isn't yours from land you don't own. Mom, Daniel started, I think you should leave. We're not done discussing this, Rebecca said, shoving the papers back into her folder with sharp movements. Yes, we are. As they gathered their things, Rebecca paused at the door. This isn't over, Mother. One way or another, change is coming to this place. You can either profit from it or be crushed by it. After they left, I stood in my kitchen, staring at the indentations their papers had left on the table. My hands shook as I cleared the barely touched meal. Outside, their SUV's taillights disappeared down the drive, taking with them any illusion I'd held about what my children had become. But I'd faced down blizzards that killed half our herd, droughts that turned grass to dust, and the death of the only man I'd ever loved. I'd be damned if I'd let 2 children who'd forgotten the value of earth under their fingernails take what Edward and I had built. They wanted a fight, they'd get one, but they had no idea who they were fighting. The morning after their visit, I woke at 5:30 as always, my body conditioned by decades of ranch life. But something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, even for Dawn. When I reached for my phone to check the weather, I found a text from Daniel. Mom, need your help with the barn door. Looks like the wind damaged it last night. I'm already here. I should have known better. Daniel hadn't voluntarily done ranch work since high school, but concern overrode suspicion. That barn held equipment worth thousands, and we'd had strong winds lately. I pulled on my work clothes and boots, grabbed my jacket against the October chill. The walk to the barn took 5 minutes, my breath visible in the cold air. Sure enough, Daniel's rental car sat parked beside the structure, and the main door hung askew. Daniel? I called, stepping inside. The barn was dim, filled with shadows and the smell of hay and motor oil. Over here, Mom! His voice came from behind the tractor. I moved toward him, squinting in the poor light. That's when I saw Rebecca step out from behind a support beam. My stomach dropped. What's going on? We're having another conversation, Rebecca said calmly. One where you'll actually listen. I turned to leave, but Daniel moved faster than I expected. His hands I'd taught to be gentle with animals, gripped my arms hard enough to bruise. The shock of it froze me more than his strength. Daniel, what are you... The first blow came from Rebecca. Not with her fists. She was too careful for that. Instead, she used something I recognized with sick irony. Edward's old leather belt, the one he'd kept hanging in the barn for emergency repairs. It caught me across the hip, sending fire through my side. This is for your own good, she said, her voice eerily steady. Sometimes people need help seeing reason. I tried to wrench free, but Daniel's grip tightened. Another blow, this time across my lower back. The pain was sharp. Targeted, she knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum hurt with minimum visible damage. Stop, I gasped. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with us? Rebecca's laugh was ugly. We're trying to save you from yourself. Do you want to die out here alone? Because that's what'll happen. Another strike. My knees buckled, but Daniel held me upright, through the pain. I heard my own voice. Strangely calm. Your father would be ashamed. That made Rebecca pause. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt, maybe even shame. Then it hardened back to cold determination. Dad's dead, she said, and his romantic notions about this place died with him. She hit me again, and this time Daniel let me fall. I landed hard on the packed dirt floor, my hips screaming where it connected, above me. They loomed like strangers wearing my children's faces. Here's what's going to happen, Rebecca said, pulling a folder from inside her coat. She dropped it beside me, pages spilling out. You're going to sign these papers. Transfer of deed to a trust we've set up. You'll retain lifetime residency rights. Generous monthly allowance. Everyone wins. I forced myself to focus through the pain, to read what I could see. The letterhead made my blood run cold. Steinberg and Associates, known for their ruthless elder law manipulations. Go to hell, I whispered. Rebecca sighed like I was a difficult child. I was hoping you'd be reasonable. She crouched beside me, her voice dropping to a conversational tone that was somehow worse than anger. Mom, you need to understand something. We've already talked to Adult Protective Services about our concerns. Your isolation, your refusal to accept help, the way you're letting the property deteriorate. Add a fall in the barn, some confusion about how it happened. Well, competency hearings can be so unpredictable. The threat was clear, sign, or they'd have me declared incompetent. I'd seen it happen to Edith Morrison over in Sweetgrass County. Her kids had her in a memory care facility within 6 months. Her ranch sold before she even understood what was happening. I won't sign. Each word cost me, but I pushed them out. Then I guess you'll stay here until you do, Daniel said quietly. He actually sounded sad, as if this was hurting him more than me. We'll check on you later. Maybe a few hours of thinking will help. They left me there, closing the barn door behind them. I heard the click of a padlock. When had they put that on? I lay on the cold ground, every breath sending new waves of pain through my body. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the barn walls. Dust motes dancing in the beams like tiny angels, or maybe devils. I couldn't tell anymore. But beneath the pain, beneath the shock of betrayal, something else stirred. Rage, yes, but colder and more focused than any fury I'd felt before. They thought they'd broken me. They thought a few bruises and threats would make me fold like a house of cards. They forgot that I'd buried my husband on this land, birth calves in blizzards, faced down a grizzly to protect my herd. They forgot that Edward hadn't just loved me. He'd prepared me. And somewhere in his old office, in the desk they'd never bothered to search, lay papers they didn't know existed. I just had to survive long enough to use them. Slowly, carefully, I began to assess my injuries. Bruised, not broken, painful, but not debilitating. I'd been hurt worse breaking horses in my 30s. The belt she'd chosen, Edward's belt, that was psychological warfare. But Rebecca had made a crucial mistake. She'd left the papers. I pulled them closer. Reading through the pain, the more I read, the more I understood their desperation. Silver Valley's offer had a deadline, 2 weeks from today. Without my signature, the deal died. And buried in the legalese was something else. Daniel had already taken out loans against his expected inheritance. Rebecca had made promises to investors based on this land. They weren't just greedy, they were desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. They kept me in that barn for 3 hours before Daniel returned, unlocking the padlock with shaking hands. He wouldn't meet my eyes as he helped me to my feet, his touch gentler now but still firm enough to remind me who held the power. Ready to be reasonable, he asked? I leaned on him, playing up my injuries more than necessary. Let them think they'd won. I need to go inside. I need to think. Back in the house, I moved slowly, deliberately. Rebecca waited in the living room, papers spread across the coffee table like weapons. She watched me sink into Edward's chair with satisfaction. I'll make some tea, Daniel offered, still playing the concerned son. While he was in the kitchen, I studied Rebecca, my daughter, who'd once brought me hand-picked wildflowers every morning, now looked at me like a problem to be solved. Why, I asked quietly. For a moment, her mask slipped. You wouldn't understand. The opportunities I've passed up, waiting for. And Daniel's practice is failing. He needs capital. We both do. So you'd destroy your heritage for money? Heritage doesn't pay for Emma's college tuition or Mom's medical bills when you inevitably need care you can't afford. She leaned forward. We're doing this for you too, whether you see it or not. That night, after they'd gone back to their hotel in town, so confident they'd broken me that they didn't even stay to watch, I made my way to Edward's study. Each movement sent pain through my bruised body, but pain was just information. It told me I was alive, still fighting. The desk looked exactly as Edward had left it 5 years ago. I'd cleaned around it, but never disturbed his arrangement. Now I pulled out the bottom drawer and felt along the back until I found the hidden panel. Edward had shown me this the week before his first heart surgery. Just in case, he'd said, winking like it was a game. Inside was an envelope yellowed with age. My hands trembled as I opened it. Asterisk, my dearest Margaret. Asterisk. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're facing something I always feared might happen. I've watched too many ranch families torn apart by greed when land values soared. I pray our children are different, but if they're not, you'll need protection. Asterisk 20 years ago, I had Harriet Cole at the county office help me draft a conservation easement for our land. It's not filed, that's your choice, but it's legal and ready. Once executed, it prevents any development beyond agricultural use in perpetuity. The land value drops significantly, but it can never be turned into a resort or subdivision. Asterisk Harriet retired but lives in Laurel now. Her number is below. She knows more about land law than any lawyer in the state and has copies of everything. Asterisk, I also documented every improvement we made, every penny invested. Our children didn't help build this place. We did. Don't let anyone tell you different. Asterisk, fight smart, my love. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply protecting what matters. Asterisk, all my love, Edward Asterisk. P.E.S. Check the grain storage records from 1995. You'll understand. I sat back, tears streaming down my face, even from beyond the grave. Edward was protecting me, protecting us, protecting the land that had been our life. The postscript puzzled me until I found the old ledgers. There, in Edward's careful handwriting, was an entry that made me gasp. In 1995, when the kids were in college, we'd nearly lost the ranch to drought. We'd survived by selling a conservation easement on the back 600 acres, but not to the state, to a private trust Edward had set up, a trust that named me sole beneficiary and decision-maker. My children thought they were fighting for 1,200 acres, but I only fully controlled 600. The rest was already protected, generating enough income from the conservation payments to cover taxes for life. Edward, you brilliant, wonderful man. I picked up the phone and dialed the number from the letter. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. Hello? Harriet, this is Margaret Ellison, Edward's wife. A pause, then, Margaret, I've been expecting your call for 5 years. What took so long? My children just tried to force me to sell to developers. They hurt me. Harriet. The silence on the other end was heavy with understanding. How bad? Bad enough, but I'm still standing. Good. Edward always said you were tougher than rawhide. You ready to play the cards he left you? I need more than the easement. They're threatening competency hearings, elder abuse claims. They've got lawyers. Harriet chuckled. A sound like dry leaves. Honey, I spent 30 years in that county office. I know where everybody is buried, legally speaking. But first, you need a real lawyer. You ever hear of Laura Bennett? No. She's out of Billings. Specializes in elder law and land conservation. More importantly, she hates developers with a passion that borders on religious. Lost her family ranch to eminent domain when she was young. She's been getting revenge ever since. Will she take my case? With what your kids just did? She'll take it for free if she has to. But she won't have to. That conservation trust Edward set up, it's got a legal defense fund attached. He thought of everything. I closed my eyes, feeling Edward's presence so strongly it took my breath away. What do I do first? Document everything. Photograph your injuries tonight. Bruises show up better after a few hours. Write down everything they said, did, threatened. Save any texts, voicemails, papers they left. Then call Laura first thing tomorrow. They'll be back. They're desperate. Then give them what they want to see. Play the defeated old woman. Let them think they've won. The best trap is the one that looks like surrender. After we hung up, I sat in Edward's chair, surrounded by evidence of his foresight and love. My body ached, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. My children had awakened something they should have left sleeping. Tomorrow, I'd begin the performance of my life, but tonight, I mourned the family I'd thought I had and prepared to save the land that was my true legacy. The next morning, I began my performance. When Daniel and Rebecca arrived at 9 sharp, they found me still in my nightgown, moving slowly around the kitchen with exaggerated difficulty. "Mom?" Daniel's voice carried genuine concern. "Good. Let him think his violence had broken more than my spirit." "Oh." I turned slowly, blinking as if confused. "You're here already? I haven't even made coffee." Rebecca and Daniel exchanged glances. I saw triumph flicker in my daughter's eyes. "That's okay, Mom. We brought breakfast." Rebecca set a bag from the town bakery on the counter. "Why don't you sit down?" I shuffled to the table, letting my hand shake slightly as I lowered myself into the chair. I didn't sleep well. Keep thinking about yesterday. "We're sorry about that," Daniel said quickly. "Things got out of hand." "We were just frustrated," Rebecca added, watching me carefully. "You understand that, don't you? We only want what's best." I nodded slowly, then looked at them with calculated confusion. "What was that company's name again? The one that wants the land?" "Silver Valley Development," Rebecca replied, leaning forward. "Mom, are you feeling all right?" "Just tired, so tired." I rubbed my forehead. Maybe you were right. This place is getting to be too much." Over the next 3 days, I gave them exactly what they wanted to see. I forgot names, repeated questions, moved like every joint ached. When they brought papers, I'd start to read them, then claim the print was too small, my eyes too tired. "Maybe tomorrow," I'd say vaguely. "It's so much to understand." Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. I'd found Edward's old digital camera and photographed my bruises in the bathroom mirror. The purple-black marks across my hip and back told their own story. I recorded conversations using the voice memo app on my phone, leaving it innocently on the counter while they talked. The most damning recording came on day 4. They thought I was napping in the bedroom, but I'd crept to the hallway to listen. "We need to move faster," Rebecca hissed. "The evaluation is scheduled for Monday." "Doctor. Morrison is ready to testify that she's showing signs of dementia," Daniel replied. "But it would be better if she signed before that cleaner." Then we increase the pressure. I'll call Tom Harrington, tell him she's been wandering the property at night, build a pattern of concerning behavior. Tom Harrington, the sheriff. My heart sank realizing how deep their planning went. That evening, I made my move. After they left, I drove to town, slowly, carefully, like the confused old woman they believed I was. But instead of the grocery store, I pulled into the parking lot of Laurel Methodist Church, where Harriet had arranged to meet me. She was waiting in a beat-up Ford pickup, looking exactly as I'd imagined, steel gray hair, sharp eyes, wearing a fleece vest despite the cold. "Margaret," she studied my face, "you look like hell." "Feel worse, but I'm acting even worse than that." "Smart. Laura's waiting inside. Brought some interesting information." The church basement was empty except for a woman in her 50s, dressed in jeans and a blazer, with eyes that reminded me of a hunting hawk. Laura Bennett stood when she saw me, her handshake firm. "Mrs. Ellison, I've reviewed the documents Harriet sent. Your husband was brilliant." Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. The conservation trust he established is bulletproof, but that's just the beginning. She spread papers across the folding table. "I've been investigating Silver Valley Development. They're leveraged to the hilt on this project. Without your land, they don't have water rights for the golf course. The whole development becomes worthless." "My children know this?" "Your daughter brokered the initial deal. She stands to make a $3 million commission. Your son—" Laura's expression darkened. "He's in deeper. Apparently, he's been telling clients he'll have capital from a family trust soon. Classic fraud." I sank into a metal chair. "They're criminals?" "Desperate people who've crossed legal lines," Laura corrected, "which works in our favor. Here's what I propose." She outlined a strategy that was elegant in its simplicity. We'd file the conservation easement quietly, backdate it properly since Edward had signed it years ago. The moment it was recorded, the land's development value would plummet simultaneously. We'd file elder abuse charges with documentation. But the real beauty, Laura smiled coldly, is the countersuit, attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, conspiracy to commit fraud, assault. With your recordings and photographs, they're looking at criminal charges. I don't want them in prison, I said quietly. I just want them gone. Harriet spoke up. That's your leverage. They sign away any claim to the property, agree to no contact, and you don't press charges. Can we record the easement without them knowing? I can file it Friday at 4:59. Harriet grinned. County office closes at 5. By the time anyone checks Monday morning, it'll be done. I thought about it. 3 more days of playing the confused old woman. 3 more days of their condescension and manipulation. But then freedom, for me and the land. There's one more thing, Laura added. That behavioral evaluation they've scheduled? Doctor, Morrison lost his license in Wyoming for falsifying competency evaluations. He just doesn't know I know yet. For the first time in days, I smiled genuinely. Edward really did think of everything. No, Harriet corrected. He thought of you. He knew you'd need weapons, so he spent 20 years stockpiling them. That night, I drove home through darkness that felt less oppressive. My children were waiting, having let themselves in with keys I'd forgotten they had. Where were you? Rebecca demanded. We were worried. I blinked slowly, touched my forehead. Was I out? I don't remember. Sometimes I just drive. The concern on their faces was almost comical. They actually believed their manufactured narrative was becoming reality. Mom, Daniel said gently, taking my arm, this is what we're talking about. You need help. I let him guide me to the couch, playing the role they'd cast me in. Just 3 more days. Then the trap would spring, and they'd learn that the woman they'd dismissed as weak and confused had been playing a longer game than they'd ever imagined. Edward's words echoed in my mind. Fight smart, my love. I was winning. Over the next 3 days, I became a ghost of myself, at least in my children's eyes. I perfected the art of the blank stare, the repeated question, the trembling hand reaching for a teacup, all while my mind stayed sharp as a scalpel, cataloging every word, every threat, every casual cruelty they dispensed. Laura Bennett proved to be worth her weight in gold. She worked quietly, efficiently, gathering ammunition we didn't even know we needed. She discovered that Rebecca had already taken out a bridge loan against her expected commission, that Daniel had been suspended from trading pending an investigation, something he'd hidden from everyone, including his wife. Your children are drowning, Laura told me during our secret meeting at Harriet's house Thursday night, and they see you as the life raft. Problem is, they're willing to push you under to save themselves. I held the mug of tea Harriet had made, its warmth the only comfort in a week of cold revelations. The easement is ready. Filed and waiting, Harriet will submit it tomorrow at 4:58 exactly. By Monday morning, your land will be protected for the next 1,000 years. They've scheduled the competency evaluation for Monday at 10. I said, Doctor, Morrison is supposed to come to the house. Laura's smile was sharp. About that, I had a fascinating conversation with the medical board. Seems Dr. Morrison is very eager to avoid another investigation. He's agreed to cancel due to a scheduling conflict. They'll find another doctor. Let them try. By then, we'll have filed our own evaluation request with a legitimate specialist, one who'll find you sharp as ever. She pulled out a manila envelope. But first, we need to discuss tomorrow night. The plan was elegant. After the easement was filed, I'd invite my children for dinner, one last family meal. Laura would be waiting nearby with the sheriff, the real one, not Tom Harrington, who Daniel thought they'd corrupted. Turns out, Sheriff Anders had been watching Harrington for months, suspecting him of taking bribes. You'll need to get them to admit what they've done, Laura said, on record. They're not stupid, No, but they're desperate, and desperate people. Make mistakes, I finished. I know. Friday crawled by like a wounded animal. Daniel and Rebecca hovered, talking in hushed voices about arrangements and transitions. They'd brought more papers, started making lists of livestock to sell, equipment to auction. This old tractor could bring decent money, Rebecca mused, running her hand along the John Deere Edward had restored. Collectors love vintage machinery. Each word was a needle under my skin, but I just nodded vaguely. Edward loved that tractor. Dad's gone. Mom, Daniel said gently, as if explaining to a child, you have to let go. At 4:45, my phone buzzed with a text from Harriet. Heading to the courthouse. At 4:59, done. Congratulations, Margaret, the land is safe. I deleted the messages and shuffled to the kitchen. Would you two stay for dinner? I think I'm ready to discuss things. The triumph in their eyes made me sick. They agreed immediately, probably thinking this was their victory lap. I made Edward's pot roast, the smell filling the kitchen with memories of better times, while it cooked. I placed the small recording device Laura had given me under the table's centerpiece. Then I set the table with our good china, the plates my children had eaten from every Sunday of their childhood. This is nice, Mom, Daniel said as we sat down. He almost sounded sincere. Like old times, Rebecca added, though her eyes kept drifting to her phone. I served them, my hands steady now. No more trembling. The performance was almost over. I've been thinking, I began slowly, about what you said, about the burden of this place. They both leaned forward, predators scenting blood. It's been hard since your father died, harder than I admitted. I paused, letting them think I was struggling. But what happened in the barn? That wasn't right. Daniel's face flushed. Mom, we explained. You hurt me. I looked directly at him. My own son held me while my daughter beat me. How did we get here? You weren't listening. Rebecca's mask slipped. Do you know what I've risked for this deal? My reputation, my career, everything. So you hit me? Sometimes people need encouragement to see reason, she said coldly. Is that what you'll tell the police? The silence was deafening. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice careful. There's no need to involve authorities. We're family. Are we? I stood slowly, walked to the window. Outside, I could see Laura's car parked just out of sight, because family doesn't forge signatures on loan applications. Daniel went white. How did you? Family doesn't lie to medical boards about their mother's mental state, doesn't bribe sheriffs, doesn't plan to have their mother declared incompetent to steal her land. It's not stealing if we're entitled to it, Rebecca snapped, all pretense gone. That land should have been divided years ago. You're just too selfish to see it. Entitled? I turned back to them. There's that word again, tell me. What exactly entitles you to land you never worked, to destroy something you never built? We're your children! No, my children love this place. Love their father, these people sitting at my table. I don't know who you are. Daniel stood, anger finally overtaking caution. You sanctimonious old woman. You'd rather die alone on this worthless ranch than help your own family? Worthless? I laughed. Is that why you're so desperate for it? The development deal is worth millions. Rebecca was on her feet, too. Millions that could secure our futures, our children's futures. But you'd rather play pioneer woman, pretending this is still 1880. So you beat me. Plan to lock me away, all for money. Yes! Rebecca slammed her hand on the table. Because unlike you, we live in the real world, where money matters, where opportunities like this don't come twice. Becca, Daniel warned, but she was beyond stopping. No, I'm tired of pretending. Yes, we hurt you. Yes, we were going to have you declared incompetent. The papers are already drawn up. Morrison would have signed anything for $20,000. And if I died from the stress, the injuries? Daniel's voice was ice. Then the estate would pass to us anyway. Problem solved. There it was. The admission Laura needed. My own children discussing my death like a business transaction. I walked to the door and opened it. You can come in now. Sheriff Anders entered first, followed by Laura and 2 deputies. The look on my children's faces was almost worth everything they'd put me through. Almost. Daniel Ellison, Rebecca Ellison Grant, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse, assault, and attempted fraud, Anders said, pulling out handcuffs. This is entrapment, Rebecca shrieked. She set us up. No, I said quietly. You set yourselves up the moment you decided I was an obstacle instead of your mother. As the deputies cuffed them, Laura handed me a folder. The conservation easement was recorded at 4:59 p.m. The land is protected in perpetuity. They can't touch it. Daniel stared at me, finally understanding. You were never confused, never weak. No, but you were too busy counting your stolen chickens to notice the fox in the henhouse. The dining room felt smaller with 6 people in it, especially with 2 of them in handcuffs. Rebecca's face had gone from red to white, to a mottled purple that reminded me of the bruises she'd given me. Daniel just stared at the floor. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Mom, he said quietly, please, think about what you're doing. Criminal charges? We're your children. My children died somewhere between college and today, I replied. I don't know exactly when, but these strangers wearing their faces, you're not them. Sheriff Anders cleared his throat. Mrs. Ellison, we need you to come to the station to give a full statement. Miss Bennett will accompany you. In a moment. I walked to the sideboard where Edward's picture sat in its silver frame. First, I have something to say. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. A victory speech. How noble of you, Mother. I turned to face them. No victory, just truth. You want to know the real irony? If you'd come to me honestly, told me about your troubles, asked for help, I would have found a way. Maybe not selling the land, but something. We could have worked together. Together, Rebecca spat. You've never cared about our lives, our dreams. It was always about this place, about Dad, about your precious legacy. Is that what you tell yourself? That I was a bad mother who deserved betrayal? You chose dirt over your own children. No, I chose integrity over greed, values over profit, the very things your father and I tried to teach you. I pulled out a chair and sat down, suddenly exhausted. Do you know why Silver Valley really wanted this land? Silence. Water rights, Laura interjected. Your mother's property controls the headwaters of 3 streams. Without those rights, they can't build their golf course, can't guarantee water for 500 luxury homes. The development is dead without this ranch. I watched understanding dawn on their faces. But here's what you didn't know. The conservation easement Edward prepared, it includes selling water rights to the county for agricultural use only. Fair market value. Enough to cover taxes and maintenance forever. You could have had comfortable lives. Good inheritances. Just not millions. You're lying, Daniel whispered. The paperwork is all here, Laura said, spreading documents on the table. The water rights sale closes next month. $400,000 up front, then $30,000 annually, indexed for inflation. Rebecca stared at the papers. That's enough to live well? Yes. To get rich quick? No. I stood again. And that's where you lost your way. You wanted wealth, not security, power, not peace. This is cruel, Daniel said, dangling what we could have had. Cruel? I touched my side where the bruises were finally fading. Was it cruel when you held me down? When your sister beat me with your father's belt? When you planned to lock me away in some facility while you sold off everything that mattered? Sheriff Anders shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Ellison, we really need to go. 1 more minute. I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes. These are from your father. He wrote them years ago, asked me to give them to you if this ever happened. With cuffed hands. They couldn't take them easily. I set the envelopes on the table. I'll make sure they get them after processing, Anders said. Rebecca's mask finally cracked completely. Daddy wrote us letters? He loved you both, always, but he saw things I missed, saw how success was changing you, how money was becoming your only measure of worth. I moved toward the door, then stopped. There's one more thing. They looked at me with a mixture of hope and fear. The charges. Laura says I have options. Mom? Daniel's voice cracked like he was 15 again. Criminal prosecution means trials, publicity, your careers destroyed, your children growing up with parents in prison. I let that sink in. Or we can handle this civilly. Restraining orders, financial restitution for my injuries and legal costs, and you sign away any claim to the estate forever. That's blackmail, Rebecca said weakly. No, that's mercy. More than you showed me. Laura stepped forward. You have 72 hours to decide. Criminal charges can be filed anytime within the statute of limitations. Choose wisely. As the deputies led them out, Daniel turned back one last time. I'm sorry, Mom. I got lost. I know, I said softly. Maybe someday you'll find your way back. But it won't be here. The house felt empty after they left. Laura and I sat at the kitchen table while she prepared my statement. Outside, the sun was setting over the hay fields, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. You could have destroyed them, she said quietly. They're still my children. Broken, greedy, lost, but mine, this way, they have a chance to rebuild, somewhere else. Think they'll take the deal? They're shrewd enough to recognize defeat. They'll take it. Laura gathered her papers. For what it's worth. Margaret, you handled this with more grace than they deserved. Grace? I laughed, but it wasn't bitter. I wanted to burn their worlds down, make them suffer like they made me suffer. But that's not what Edward would have wanted. And revenge like that, it poisons the land. After Laura left, I walked out to the porch. The ranch stretched before me in the dying light. Every acre saved, every stream protected. But the victory felt hollow. I'd won the land but lost my family. No, I'd lost them long before this week. This just made it official. Tomorrow, there would be paperwork, decisions, the business of aftermath. But tonight, I sat in Edward's rocking chair and watched the stars come out over our land, protected land, safe land, land that would outlive us all. I did it, Edward, I whispered to the night, just like you taught me. Fought smart, not angry. The wind through the cottonwoods sounded almost like approval. Or maybe that was just what I needed to hear. Either way, the land was safe. The rest? Well, the rest would take time to heal. But I had that now. Time. And 1,200 acres of Montana sky. 3 days later, they took the deal. Laura called me at 6 a.m, her voice carrying a mixture of satisfaction and relief. They signed everything. Restraining orders, property disclaimers, the works. Daniel's lawyer pushed for visitation rights to the ranch, but I shut that down. They come within 500 feet of your property. They violate the order. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. And the criminal charges? Suspended, pending their compliance. They step out of line once. We can still file. Your medical records and the recordings are sealed with the court. Their children, my grandchildren? Laura's voice softened. That's up to you. The order doesn't extend to them, but given that Emma is only 12 and David is 9, maybe when they're older, when they can understand and choose for themselves. After I hung up, I made coffee and walked out to the porch. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of frost and hay. Down by the creek, a family of deer picked their way through the willows. They'd been coming here for generations, long before I arrived, and would keep coming long after I was gone. That's what Daniel and Rebecca never understood. We don't own land like this. We're just caretakers for a while. The next weeks passed in a blur of legal finalizations and ranch work. The water rights sale went through smoothly, depositing more money than I'd need for a lifetime of operations. I hired 2 young hands from town, kids who reminded me of Daniel and Rebecca before ambition poisoned them. They worked hard, respected the land, and called me ma'am with genuine courtesy. One evening, while sorting through Edward's papers, I found another letter. This one was addressed to me, dated just a month before his heart attack. Asterisk, my dearest Margaret. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then you've weathered the storm I always feared might come. I know it hurts. I know you're questioning everything, how we raised them, what we did wrong, if love was enough. Here's what I need you to know. We gave them everything that mattered: values, education, opportunity. What they chose to do with those gifts was their decision, not our failure. Please don't let their choices poison the well of your memories. Remember the children they were. Mourn who they chose not to become, but don't carry guilt that isn't yours. Asterisk, the land is safe now. You're safe. That's what matters. Let the rest go. Asterisk, all my love always. Edward Asterisk. I pressed the letter to my chest and let the tears come. Not for the children who'd betrayed me, but for the man who'd seen it coming and loved us all anyway. Silver Valley Development folded 2 months later. Without my water rights, their permits were revoked. The other ranchers they'd been pressuring sent me thank you cards and casseroles, the currency of rural gratitude. Rebecca's real estate firm quietly let her go. Daniel's investment company dissolved while he fought SEC violations. I tracked their downfall not with satisfaction, but with sadness. They'd built their lives on foundations of sand, and the tide had finally come in. 1 year later, I received a letter forwarded through Laura's office, Daniel's handwriting, shaky but recognizable. Asterisk, Mom, asterisk. Asterisk, I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. Losing everything I'd built on lies taught me what you and Dad tried to show us about real value. I'm working construction now, honest work. My hands are finally doing something real. Rebecca is in therapy, facing what we became. Maybe someday we'll be people you could be proud of again. Asterisk, the kids ask about you. I tell them you're taking care of the ranch, just like you always have. Asterisk, I drive past sometimes just to see the fence lines. You were right to save it. It's the only honest thing our family has left. Asterisk, your son, if I can still call myself that. Daniel. Asterisk. I read it twice, then filed it away. Maybe someday, but not today. Today, I had cattle to check, fences to mend, land to tend, the work Edward and I had done for 40 years that we'd hoped our children would continue. They'd chosen different paths, but the land remained. As I saddled my horse for the morning rounds, I thought about legacy, not money or property, but the deeper inheritance, integrity, connection to the earth, the ability to see wealth in things that can't be sold. My children had rejected that inheritance, but maybe their children, given time and distance from their parents' choices, might find their way back to it. The land would be here, protected and waiting, just in case. I mounted up and rode out into the morning, 70 years old and finally free. Behind me, the house stood solid against the sky. Ahead, 1,200 acres of grassland rolled toward the mountains, unchanged and unchangeable. The horse's hooves beat a steady rhythm on the packed earth. The wind carried the scent of sage and possibility, and somewhere, Edward's spirit rode with me, whispering that the hardest battles are won not with anger but with patience, not with cruelty but with wisdom. I'd lost my children but saved their heritage. Whether they'd ever understand that gift, well, that was their journey to make. Mine was here, on this land under this endless Montana sky, alone perhaps, but not lonely, betrayed but not broken, and free, finally and forever free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Margaret's place? Your perspectives make these stories richer for everyone.